Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really thought-provoking area where justice, law, and vigilantism kind of intersect.
Yeah,
We've got a fascinating collection of sources here, sent in by one of you, that really get into the nitty-gritty of this topic from, well, different angles.
that's right. We'll be looking at academic takes on Batman comics, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, tracing how Batman and the Joker changed in the comics over time, and also digging into a philosophical look at what vigilantism actually is.
So our goal in this deep dive is really to connect these seemingly diverse sources and pull out the key insights about some really fundamental ideas, like what is justice in different contexts? What's the intended role of law?
And, what drives individuals to take matters into their own hands, especially when that means operating outside the law.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So one of the first maybe surprising perspectives in our sources is this idea that Batman comics, they can actually be seen as a form of legal philosophy.
Jurisprudence, yeah.
It's exactly. Jurisprudence. Legal thinkers like William P. McNeill and Richard K. Sherwin, they suggest that popular culture, including comics, can offer these really valuable ways to understand our ideas about law.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? Looking at a comic book as a way to explore serious legal themes.
Right.
But when you think about how often Batman is grappling with the failures, the limitations of the legal system in Gotham, well, it starts to make a lot of sense.
Precisely. And the analysis points out this core tension in Batman's character.
Okay.
On one side, he seems to embody a kind of modern natural law idea, striving for this ideal justice that goes beyond specific legal codes. But his methods, they often involve violence, and they're clearly driven by this desire for vengeance, too.
So he's pursuing justice, yeah, but not necessarily playing by the rules.
Not within the system, no.
And here's where it gets really interesting. One source points to how Batman relies on reason, on logic, even in the middle of all that Gotham chaos.
Yeah, that dark victory scene.
With the rope.
Exactly. Where he uses the rope, and it's shown not just as a tool, but as a symbol of rational logic in a world that often feels, well, completely irrational.
And the image that goes with it, the source included it. It really drives that home, doesn't it?
It does. Amidst this snowy, uncertain setting, Batman says he's found something tangible, the rope, to work with. It's a really potent visual for his attempt to ground himself in reason.
And it's not just his gadgets, even the costume, the whole Batman persona. Bruce Wayne explains it as a calculated, logical way to scare criminals. Miller and Mazzucchelli's work, Nolan's films, they really lean into this.
Yeah, Sharp actually details how Bruce deliberately chose the bat symbol. It was a key part of his strategy for delivering justice his way.
And if we tie this back to the bigger picture, Batman showing up in Gotham, that scene from Batman, Year One.
Oh, yeah.
Where he basically declares war on the corrupt elite. It just hammers home his role as a response to the system failing.
Totally. The image and that quote, "Your feast is nearly over and none of you are safe," it really highlights that he sees himself as necessary because the established order isn't working.
Right. So to really get why Batman operates outside the normal legal framework, we kind of need to look at how our ideas about justice and law have even developed.
Yeah, let's dig into that history a bit.
Okay.
The sources trace this evolution. You start with classical natural law, like Aristotle.
Right.
He saw justice as both the process and the outcome of restoring a natural balance. There wasn't really a sharp split between justice and law. The Greek term dikaion covered both.
Ah, okay. So if things were out of whack, dikaion was how you fixed it, brought back harmony.
Pretty much. Then you get to medieval natural law, thinkers like Augustine Aquinas. They brought God into the picture as the ultimate source of natural law.
So human laws had to line up with God's plan to be considered just.
Exactly. They needed to align with this divine blueprint for the universe.
Okay, got it. And then we get to modern natural law, Enlightenment thinkers, Hobbes.
Yes. And the focus shifts. It moves away from divine authority towards reason and mutual agreement.
The social contract idea.
Right. Hobbes argued that without a government enforcing rules, life would just be chaos, nasty, brutish, and short, as he put it.
Yeah.
So the social contract emerges. People give up some freedom for security and stability, provided by a society with a sovereign power enforcing agreed-upon rules.
Okay, so thinking about Batman, who's definitely not playing by those agreed-upon rules, how does he fit with these ideas of natural law and the social contract?
Well, the argument in the sources is twofold. First, His actions could be seen as trying to uphold a higher ideal justice, separate from flawed human laws. That echoes some natural law thinking.
Right, like there's a right thing beyond what the law books say.
Exactly. And second, his very existence, the need for Batman in Gotham, suggests the social contract is broken down.
Because the state isn't holding up its end of the bargain, can't protect people.
Precisely. If the state fails to protect its citizens under the rule of law, then maybe, just maybe, someone like Batman stepping into that gap becomes, well, understandable. Sharp even suggests popular sovereignty. The people's will could implicitly authorize Batman's actions when the system fails so badly.
Like the community just accepts him because they need someone.
Kind of, yeah. But that leads us straight into a really tricky, ethically tangled area.
Yeah.
Legitimate force versus just plain vengeance.
Yeah, definitely.
Generally, we accept that the state holds a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, to prevent harm, keep order.
Police, courts, prisons.
Right. But even the law itself involves force, what the sources call law's violence. The force used in making laws, enforcing them, interpreting them.
Like an arrest or a legal penalty. That's force.
It is. And we also have specific times when private citizens can use force, like citizens' arrest or self-defense.
Okay.
But there's a big difference. Police operate under legal frameworks, training, oversight. Private citizens using force, that's usually judged by a much vaguer standard of reasonableness.
Right. It's not the same level of scrutiny. And the sources also mention these, private areas where people might choose not to involve the police at all.
That's another layer, yeah. Now, let's pivot to Batman's personal reasons. His trauma is obviously huge.
The murder of his parents.
It's the core event. That moment in Crime Alley, it defines him.
That image of young Bruce, it's burned into pop culture, and it comes up again and again in these sources.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is how Batman tries to channel that incredibly personal quest for revenge into something broader, like public justice.
By operating out in the open, protecting others.
Right. He takes his private pain and tries to turn it into a force for Gotham's greater good.
There's that really striking image with Dick Grayson in Dark Victory where Batman puts his arm around him. It feels like he's trying to stop the same thing happening to someone else. And the narration about wanting to catch his parents' killer, it feels so raw.
It really highlights this idea that revenge often isn't enough. Doesn't necessarily fix anything or ease the pain. We see that with the killer of Bruce's parents and arguably with the Batman himself, who just keeps going.
So Batman operating outside the system, our sources link this back to natural law, but as a kind of resistance.
Precisely. When the actual laws on the book's positive law seem to produce really unjust results, natural law offers a philosophical basis to challenge them.
Saying there are fundamental moral principles that should override bad laws.
Exactly. Like the idea of basic inherent human rights that protect us even from the state.
Okay.
So in Gotham, where the state is often corrupt or just plain useless, Batman acts as this force resisting both the state's failings and the criminals causing harm. He steps in where the official systems have failed.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now and look at Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. How do those films tackle these themes?
The analysis there really focuses on how the relationships between Batman, Bruce Wayne, and Gotham society change across the three movies.
Right, it's quite an evolution.
It is. And it brings in Althusser's ideas about ISAs and RSAs.
Okay, refresh my memory.
ISAs, ideological state apparatuses, are things like religion, schools, media. They promote social norms without direct force. RSA's repressive state apparatuses are police, military. They maintain order using force.
Got it. So the Gotham City Police Department in the films
mostly functions as an RSA. They're focused on upholding the system, the law as written, even if it means pushing Batman away because his methods are illegal.
Yeah, you see that tension a lot.
And the analysis really highlights that scene with Salvatore Maroni in The Dark Knight.
Oh, the ankle-breaking scene. Brutal.
Exactly. Batman dangling him, threatening him. His line, "I'm counting on it," when Maroni says the fall won't kill him. It's chilling.
This source calls it horrific and yet stimulating because it's so far beyond normal heroism.
And Maroni's reaction, him being this hardened criminal, just underscores how extreme Batman's methods are, how far outside the legal lines he operates.
And the source suggests this paradox. Batman steps outside the system to fix it, but in doing so, he almost seems to argue for a world where the system isn't even needed.
It's a core contradiction, isn't it? How can he uphold order by constantly breaking society's rules?
This also ties into Bruce Wayne's identity, right? It kind of dissolves as he becomes Batman.
Yeah, throughout the trilogy, you see Bruce Wayne almost vanish into the Batman persona. It's only really at the end of The Dark Knight Rises that he starts to reclaim himself.
But even then, he has his code. He won't kill the Joker.
Right. Unlike the Joker, Batman holds on to some moral lines, even outside the law. That refusal to kill is key. He's afraid of becoming the monster he fights.
And the Joker is presented as this total opposite. Anti-establishment, no real identity.
Yeah, the source points out funny details, like him probably not having a driver's license, not caring about hygiene. It's alienating, but also part of what makes him so unsettling.
And he's actively trying to break Batman. Right. To prove everyone's corruptible.
Exactly. To show that anyone can be pushed into madness.
Rachel Dawes has some key lines about this, doesn't she?
She really does. In Batman Begins, she tells Bruce, Batman's just a symbol, but then touches his face and says, no, this is your mask.
Oof. Your real face is the one that criminals now fear. The man I loved. He never came back at all. That's heavy.
It really underscores the personal cost. And in The Dark Knight, she accepts it, telling him she knows the day won't come when you no longer need Batman.
She sees that he's kind of lost himself to the mission.
Exactly. That his identity is now bound to being Batman, as long as Gotham is in danger.
Let's dig a bit deeper into the psychology here. The sources talk about the trauma, obviously, his parents' murder being the root of it all.
Absolutely. It's the engine driving his whole crusade against crime in Gotham.
And this inability to move past it, the source links it to PTSD.
Yeah, it suggests his difficulty processing that event, especially since it was, as Langley puts it, trauma of human design, violence by others. And trying to just suppress the anger doesn't really work. It just simmers underneath.
So Bruce Wayne, the public face, is like the superego, trying to keep things in check.
While the Batman mask lets the eat out, allows those base emotions, the anger, the force, to come out without the usual Bruce Wayne consequences.
Makes sense. He can do things as Batman he could never do as Bruce.
And Commissioner Gordon kind of accepts this, right?
Yeah.
Takes a pragmatic view that maybe Batman's necessary, even with his methods.
Yeah, but the films also show the toll it takes. By The Dark Knight Rises, Bruce is a wreck, a recluse, scarred physically and emotionally.
Totally. But then he has that whole journey in the prison pit. It's physical, but it's also deeply spiritual, finding the strength to climb out.
That chant, Deshe, Deshe, Basara, Basara, rise.
Yeah, it symbolizes him overcoming his fear, reclaiming his strength.
And even when Catwoman tells him to just leave Gotham, save himself.
You can't. His loyalty to the city, his need for redemption, it's too strong. That line to her, not everything, not yet, really points towards his final sacrifice.
Okay, now let's switch tracks again and look at the comics, specifically the dynamic between Batman and the Joker in the darker eras.
Right. The shift from the Silver Age with the Comics Code restricting things to the Bronze, and especially the modern Dark Ages where things got much grittier, much more psychological.
And this is where Jung's idea of the shadow comes in.
Exactly. The shadow, the unconscious, often repressed or negative parts of ourselves, and also the literary idea of the doppelganger, the double. These become really relevant for understanding Batman and Joker.
So the shadow is the dark stuff inside us we don't like to admit is there.
Basically, yes. And the doppelganger, the double, has two main forms in literature, according to the source. Identity theft, where one takes over another's life.
Okay.
And the monster double, which is like a dark reflection that acts on its own. And the line between just having a shadow and having an independent doppelganger could get pretty blurry.
And the Dark Age comics really ran with this, giving us messed up versions of Batman and a Joker who is way more complex and disturbing.
Definitely. Think about the origin stories. Miller's Batman. Year one for Batman, Moore's the killing joke for the Joker. Much darker takes.
Year one shows this really raw, almost brutal Batman starting out.
And the killing joke gives Joker this tragic, maybe unreliable backstory as a failed comedian pushed over the edge.
There's that image in Year one where Batman has no shadow, but his black jacket seems lit up.
Yeah, the source interprets that as him embracing his shadow, becoming the darkness to fight the darkness.
And the idea that Bruce Wayne is the real mask.
And Batman is the coping mechanism for the trauma, actively seeking out and stopping what happened to him from happening to others. Even the bad signal is like casting his shadow onto the clouds.
So the Joker changes too, from just a shadow, a recurring villain,
to a true monster double in the Dark Age. Much scarier, much more unpredictable.
And then there's that Arkham Asylum graphic novel with the idea of Joker's super sanity.
Right, the idea that he's constantly reinventing his personality to deal with the chaos of the world. Morrison's description is great. He seems to have no control. He can only cope by going with the flow. That's why some days he's a mischievous clown, others a psychopathic killer. He creates himself each day.
Wow, that's unsettling.
It is. And you even get comics like White Knight, where the roles flip, Joker becomes the hero, Batman the villain, blurring those lines even more.
And the Batman who laughs, that sounds intense.
Oh, it takes the Joker as Batman's shadow idea to a terrifying place. It explores what Batman could become if his shadow wasn't controlled by empathy.
What does Batman say about him in the source?
It's chilling. He's not the Joker, Jim. He's Batman. He's me. The Batman who laughs. He's not here to prove anything. He's here to win, to kill anything and everything that's a threat.
Yikes. So these newer comics are even questioning if Batman is actually good for Gotham.
Yeah, White Knight, the Batman who laughs. They raise that uncomfortable question. Is the city better off with him? Batman himself worries about it in his last thoughts to Alfred in The Batman Who Laughs.
Okay, this all leads us perfectly to the final piece, the philosophy of vigilantism itself.
Right. Our source defines vigilantism pretty clearly. Private citizens using illegal force to punish people they think broke the rules, basically imposing their own idea of justice instead of the state's.
And it's important to distinguish it from other things, right? Like police brutality or terrorism.
Exactly. They're distinct phenomena, different motivations, different contexts.
So philosophically, what's the case against vigilantism? Why is it generally seen as wrong?
There are a lot of reasons. Big ones are violating due process, fair trials, rights, undermining democracy by bypassing legitimate channels.
Makes sense.
Also infringing on people's autonomy by using force without consent. The risk that prejudice will drive vigilante actions.
Yeah, targeting certain groups.
Right. Plus, it can cause instability, damage faith in the actual legal system, harm both the victim and the perpetrator of the vigilante act. And fundamentally, if the legal system is working, it's just not necessary.
That's a pretty solid list of objections. Does the philosophy offer any situation where it might be okay?
Well, the source suggests it's maybe considerable, but only in extreme cases where the legal system is totally broken down, like completely collapsed or is just severely non-functional for a long time.
So it can't protect anyone or deliver any justice.
Pretty much. It mentions the Gulabi gang in rural India as a complex, real-world example that some might argue fits this. Because of a severe lack of effective law enforcement, their focus on specific wrongs against vulnerable women, and their stated goal of restoring some kind of order.
But even then, it's complicated.
Very. And the source lists some really strict conditions that would need to be met for it to be even potentially justifiable, philosophically speaking.
Like what?
Like an extraordinary breakdown of the system, clear and public procedures as much as possible, the punishment fitting the crime, a real focus on protecting vulnerable people, and the ultimate goal being to rebuild proper legal structures, not just get revenge.
That sounds like an incredibly high bar to clear.
It really is. And the source also breaks down different types of vigilantism.
Oh.
Yeah, like crime control, social control, enforcing norms, regime control, trying to overthrow a government, persecution, targeting groups.
That last one sounds bad.
It is. The source is crystal clear. Persecution vigilantism based on prejudice is never morally okay. No exceptions.
Wow, okay. We have definitely covered a ton of ground here. From Batman as legal philosophy all the way to the ethics of real-world vigilantism.
We really have.
Yeah.
We've looked at how complex justice is, the tensions between law and order, what might motivate vigilantism in fiction and reality, and the deep philosophical arguments around whether it can ever be justified.
So for you, the listener who sent us these fantastic sources, we really hope this deep dive has given you that shortcut to being well-informed you were curious about.
Yeah, hopefully you found some surprising angles and insights in our chat.
And it leaves us and you with a pretty big final thought to chew on, doesn't it?
It does. Thinking about these inherent tensions between the formal legal systems we have and that basic human desire for justice when those systems seem to fail.
When, if ever, can actions outside the law truly be called just?
And what role do figures like Batman keep playing in how we as a culture wrestle with these fundamental timeless questions?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Yeah, keep pondering these ideas and join the conversation.